If you are anything like me, when the CW was hot and poppin', you watched all of the teen dramas and you ate up all of the drama every single week. Even if the plot didn't make sense, the characters were a little bit iffy, you were there to see hot people kiss. And I feel like Reign, the CW historical romance series, really made the hot people kiss in such a different way than other CW shows did, and I feel like it deserves its own moment for that. I don't hear enough people talking about the show, so I decided to do a whole deep dive into it. And I think it might be the best period piece of all time. Like, sure, Bridgerton's really good, the Pride and Prejudice movies are really good, like, there's some bangers out there, but Reign might just be the best. So let's just dive right into my thoughts and the recap, of course. So, to start things off, just to give you an idea of what we're working with, the clothing and the settings just set this show apart. Are the clothes historically accurate? No. And is that something that reviewers at the time really detested? Absolutely yes. But I find them to be absolutely gorgeous. All of the main character women have some of the greatest, most beautiful outfits I have ever seen. Continue on the watch to be stunned by the beauty of the costumes in this. And then, of course, the setting is great. We just have opulent rooms that are sort of dark and a little bit dirty, and they are a little bit creepy. There's like hidden passages and things. So overall, it just lends to this very moody atmosphere about the show that I think just takes it up a notch, makes it feel very dreamy, and also a little bit like what's gonna happen. Before we get into the recap, I want to talk about some of the side relationships. I am not going to be talking about each individual side relationships moments within the episodes, so I thought I would give them their own spotlight here. So first up, we have Greer. I call him Lord Pepper, but it's Lord Castleroy here at the top. And then Leith. For a majority of the season, Greer and Leith are building their relationship in secret. Greer needs to marry a rich man to save her family from poverty, so she's husband hunting while also hooking up with Leith. He is a kitchen boy. He's a baker for the castle, and that's kind of how they meet. And originally, one of the men that Greer is interested in or is courting her is Lord Julian. There was a very brief moment where they were courting and it didn't work out. He walks in on her hooking up with Leith, catching Greer and Leith together, forces Leith to go off. He was originally sentenced to like death or something like that, or like getting his hands cut off or something, and then instead they send him off to be with the army. And this is kind of when Castleroy / Lord Pepper comes in, makes some appearances here and there in the early season, and then once Leith is gone, he kind of lays the moves on her. He's pretty much immediately interested in Greer, but they don't get engaged, like I said, until much later. And he's just about the sweetest man in the entire show. At the end of the season, Leith ends up saving Prince Francis's life and gets gifted lands and titles. And when Greer still denies him repeatedly, he tells her in an often seen historical romance trope that he will rise in power and wealth until he's the exact level that she demands, and he will deny her. And then he later has a brief relationship with Castleroy's daughter. So, I guess we can go on to Lola. Lola has two main love interests in this season and a couple of hookups here and there. So, first up, we have boy up top. I think his name is Colin. He shows up for a couple of episodes, tries to assassinate, escapes, and gets killed. And then her other main love interest is Julian. So, Julian and Greer's relationship is obviously on the outs. He still needs to marry. So Greer kind of gives them the okay to start courting each other. They end up getting married in this season after it is revealed that Lola is pregnant and she won't tell anyone who the father is. Like, we know who the father is, but she doesn't tell Julian. Much later on, at the end of the season, it's revealed that Julian is faking his identity, and that's sort of the end of their romance. A side relationship that is cute but doesn't really have like a really lasting impact. It's really just a couple of episodes like towards the end, is Nostradamus and Olivia, who was originally introduced as Francis's girlfriend of the past. Whatever. He nurses her back to health, and they have a bit of a romance. She asks him to leave, escape France together, and go somewhere that they will be safe. And Catherine threatens her, forcing Nostradamus to let her go and be free. And then lastly, probably the messiest, most annoying side relationships in this season are Kenna and King Henry and Sebastian. So, pretty much immediately, I think it's either the first or second episode, Kenna starts hooking up with King Henry. Now, King Henry is obviously married to Catherine, who we'll be introduced to later, but he also has a long-standing mistress that's been with him forever named Diane, and they have a child together named Sebastian. And then King Henry, in a fit of madness, forces Kenna to get married to Sebastian and maintain their sexual relationship. It's very messy. It's kind of gross. I don't like King Henry. And their relationship from the beginning is a little bit like meh. And I think that her character was done just so dirty because she's a phenomenal actress. We have quite a large cast of character in this first season, so I have kind of named all of them. I hope that it's a little bit clearer as the story goes on, because it is quite a lot all at once. We open the show in France in 1557, and Mary is in a convent in the countryside. We are pretty immediately introduced to the idea of Mary being the Queen of Scotland, and she has been tucked away in the convent for her safety. But that changes pretty quickly when her food taster drinks her soup for the evening and dies right there. She starts bleeding out of her nose, and the nuns try to get Mary out as quick as possible. They rush her off to France, and France is where we are introduced to the full French court. We meet a whole mix of characters. There's a wedding being planned for one of the princesses of the French court in this very first episode. So there's a lot of activity, a lot of buzz, and that's where we meet Francis, who is the future king. He's got this whole charming but kind of distant thing going on, and everybody knows that he's not really interested in this alliance, this marriage with Mary, but she's kind of coming regardless. He is the king's legitimate son, whereas his brother, Sebastian, who I will be calling Bash from here on forward. I don't know what happened to his name, but it should say Bash instead of Bass, but his name is Bash. He's Henry's illegitimate son. My name's got all jacked up. I just now realized this. I am so sorry. This looks messy as hell. I'll point them out for you. So we have King Henry, who is married to Catherine, and their children are Francis and a couple of other kids that pop up here and there, but they're not like super important. Most of them are children. And then Henry is, of course, with Diane, and they have their child Bash. Francis stumbles upon King Henry and Catherine planning their daughter's marriage, and tensions in the marriage are already pretty high right off the bat. Catherine is very clearly the kind of queen who's always thinking 10 steps ahead, and she has this like really intense relationship with Nostradamus, who's her personal seer. Like visions, predicting the future, and all that kind of stuff. When Mary finally arrives to court, she brings her 4 ladies-in-waiting, Greer, Kenna, Lola, and Ailey. She doesn't have any romances in this season, so she hasn't been introduced yet, but there she is. They're all super sweet and excited, but also a little bit out of their depth. While Mary was away in the convent, they all lived in Scotland, and they just are not aware of the drama of the French court. And as Mary's getting settled in, we meet Diane, who's the king's mistress and Bash's son, and we kind of immediately realize that this court is pretty complicated, it's pretty packed, there's already a lot of drama going in. But Mary is very naive and she's very sweet, and she wants to reconnect with Francis. And they have a couple of quiet moments between them that are really nice, and you can tell that there's a lot of history. But then, right as we're feeling hopeful, Nostradamus has a vision. And it's a pretty big deal. He tells Catherine, Queen Catherine, that if Francis marries Mary, Francis is going to die. So now Catherine's even more on edge. She's immediately against Mary, and Mary's coming into this as this naive girl that was raised in a convent. And the girls start exploring the castle, and Mary finds Francis in her old childhood home. He's making a ton of weapons, and they have a really honest conversation about what it means to rule and have a political marriage, and it's kind of sweet. Again, it's reinforced that Mary's very idealistic, but she does care. And later, she is exploring the castle, she's down at the beach, and she finds some stones to decorate the swords that Francis was making. But when she brings them back to Francis, he's in his room with another woman, and he brushes her off. And it's honestly kind of harsh right off the bat, very dramatic, and definitely not his best moment, but he's like, this is how it is, a wife and a queen listens to their king, get over it kind of situation. There's also a little bit of a moment where Mary is out with her dog after this happens with Francis, and she's feeling very emo. This is just not what she was anticipating, and her dog runs out into the woods, and that's where Bash finds her in the woods and brings her back. He's very clearly protective of her, but also really kind, and there's a little bit of a spark there. Tried to warn her off of going into the forest. Pretty much immediately, the crazy shit starts happening. Mary starts noticing weird things, voices coming out of secret passages in the walls, and someone trying to warn her not to drink the wine. And probably one of the strangest parts of that night, the whole court literally watches the bride and groom consummate their marriage, and the girls trying to lighten the mood afterwards play hide and seek around the castle. It's kind of playful until Kenna ends up being caught by the king while she's tickling the bean, if you will, and he gets involved. Definitely crossing some lines there, and it starts their kind of disgusting relationship. Later, Francis does apologize to Mary again, but admits that he's worried that being with her could be a political mistake for France, and he's struggling with his feelings and his duty, which, fair. That night, Mary wakes up to find Colin in her room trying to assault her. He's introduced in this episode and beheaded in the beginning of the next episode, and it's horrible. And Lola, the next morning, I guess trying to make sense of it, says he was probably forced. Mary wants him to be forgiven just based on Lola's defense of him, but Henry and Catherine, he was actually part of an English plot, and before Mary can even speak to him, he's executed. It's a lot for her to process, and when she tells Lola pulls away and says Mary isn't really her friend, and the moment is it's super heavy, and it's like where I guess the cracks in the friendship and the court and the glitter and the glam starts showing up. At the end of the episode, Mary is trying to find a little bit of solace and strength within herself alone, and Bash shows up bringing her dog back. I don't think her dog ever is relevant ever again, but that moment was cute, and he says he wants to be her friend. Diane, his mother, sees a connection and wants him to stay away, and there's a weird comment about the dog being attracted to the blood in the woods, which feels like the hint of something darker happening in the woods. And the episode ends with one last blow. Francis and Mary almost kiss, but he pulls away, and Catherine finds out that the drug they tried to use on Mary didn't work, and Mary caught Colin mid-act. Nostradamus' vision still stands. Mary will be the death of Francis. The episode opens with a bang. Colin is in the dungeons being tortured, and he gets freed by an unknown figure with a cloth bag over its face. This episode centers around the youngest prince's engagement to another royal, but while waiting for the French royals to arrive, they spot English troops beached in France after one of their ships was allegedly damaged, and we are introduced to the English emissary, Simon. He questions the legitimacy of Mary and Francis's engagement and basically threatens Mary. He makes it very clear that England was the one that tried to poison her back in the convent, and Francis saves her from Simon and attempts to calm her down, and of course, he presses her against a column, inches from each other, and the moment is just They dance together, and then Catherine finds out that Colin escaped. Mary tells Frances about the entire Colin plot and seems to allude to Catherine's involvement, and it sparks an argument where Frances just storms off. Mary asks Bash for help talking to Colin, and of course, Frances sees this little conversation, and one of Frances's brothers tells Mary about a friend that hides and gets jealous, but knows everything and goes wherever she likes. You don't get to know her until she wants you to, and her name is Clarissa. In her room, Mary finds a random woman in her room trying on one of Mary's dresses, and the woman seems to be suffering from poison. But when Mary comes back with guards, she's gone. Frances and Henry argue about Mary's presence, and he makes it very clear he has no intention of sending Mary back to Scotland, nor does he intend to marry her to Frances until it is right for France. Bash explores the woods in an attempt to find Colin and finds him dead, strung up in a tree. Mary takes it upon herself to access the passages and give Clarissa a message, to which she responds. Mary asks Clarissa if the person trying to hurt her is the English, is it Catherine, to which she provides a yes. She then leaves a key for Mary on the floor of the passage. Sebastian and Frances are attempting to bring back Colin's body when they notice they're being hunted by something in the woods. Sebastian offers his blood and says some words in another language, and they get out without being attacked. Bash tells Frances that the woods are unsafe because of the pagans who used Colin as a blood sacrifice. Mary then uses Clarissa's key to access private rooms of the English emissary Simon, where she finds him in bed with the poisoned maid. During that conversation with Simon, it's revealed that Mary is the next legitimate heir to the English throne, but she has no intentions of claiming it over her cousin, Elizabeth. Again, Mary tries to tell Frances that his mother is behind the Colin scheme and that she can't stay in the court if he won't marry her. If she's not married, she has no alliance, and she's open to English's attacks. Later, Catherine's guards admit to her that he strung up Colin just like the heretics do, and Catherine finds a red X in her bed. Frances comforts Mary and vows to protect her as best he can, and he'll be at her side. As friends. Fuck. Okay, I hope the sound has not changed drastically. I am on my phone where my little mic died. So, we get into episode 3 and we see the English crossing the Scottish border with a ton of troops, and Nostradamus has a vision about a war that will breach the French walls. Greer reveals to the girls during a picnic that she is interested in Tomas, a Portuguese lord who is in France making some sort of agreement with France. Mary receives word of the war in Scotland, but when Mary asks Henry to supply them with troops, he denies. Mary is introduced to Tomas while he's on a walk with Greer, and he pretty much seems immediately into her. Meanwhile, Henry and Frances spar with a deal that if Frances wins, France sends troops to help Scotland. Frances does win, but Henry refuses to uphold his deal anyway and acts like he's giving him a little lesson. Mary attempts to make a deal with Tomas for troops, but rather than confirming, he sets up another time for them to meet. They go riding alone together to a picnic quite far away from the castle with just him and his guards, and he proposes engagement and says he'll provide the troops if she says yes. Mary tries to deny him because of his birthright and says that she needs someone that is going to be a king, and he provides a letter from the Pope claiming he's a legitimate heir to the Portuguese throne. Frances and Mary are dancing, but Tomas interrupts them and dances very provocatively in front of everyone. This obviously makes Frances very, very jealous, as well as Greer, and they each kind of confront Mary respectively. Mary tells Frances about the engagement with Tomas. Mary and Tomas take a boat together, and he reinforces for her the benefits of their engagement, and he does mention his first wife. Remember this, first wife. And Frances convinces Henry to aid Scotland by blackmailing him with news of his relationship with Kenna. Frances sends their fastest rider, Bash, off to notify the local French troops of their next war efforts, but he comes back suffering from a stab wound. He barely gets out that they were ambushed on their journey by English and everyone was slaughtered. Henry refuses to tell Francis that there was a turncoat because it'll ruin the lesson and ensure he'll never rule with his heart again. Devastated by Francis' loss, Mary meets Francis on the rainy grounds of the castle and he kisses her. He tells her to marry Tomas and he sends her off and that Tomas will be better for Scotland than he could ever be. Bitch! The angst of this scene is afterwards she accepts Thomas's engagement. The fourth episode starts with some delightful longing and angsty glances between Mary and Francis, and Francis's jealousy is barely contained. They have this whole, like, competition thing where they're shooting arrows, and it's just, like, he's feeling it, you know? King Henry has the English ambassador Simon arrested and sentenced to death, despite his protestations to being involved with Bash's ambush, refuses to release Mary from their engagement with Francis. So, to bargain with Henry, Mary vouches for a sex worker that claims she saw Simon making deals against France. Nostradamus, in private with Catherine, reinforces for Catherine that Mary is a threat by saying, Mary's presence here will cost you your firstborn. Remember that again. During this episode, we get tons of angst-filled touches and kisses between Mary and Francis, including a lakeside picnic where they get quite close. There's some heavy petting, if you will. What Mary doesn't know during this is that Tomas has spies watching Mary's every move, and one catches an intimate moment between the two of them. Francis starts asking around about Tomas and finds out that Tomas doesn't really treat his servants well, and there's some rumors about what happened to his previous wife. Later, Mary finds Tomas in her room where he wants to discuss rules she will live by and introduces her to her whipping boy that he slaps in front of her as punishment for her behavior. The scene is very chilling. I think up to this point, Tomas has been, like, kind of on the sidelines. Like, obviously you know that that's not endgame or whatever. It's going to fall through in some way, but it's, like, really kind of scary to watch this scene happen, to be honest. Tomas then overhears Francis talking to Bash about the rumors swirling around Tomas, including him murdering his first wife. And he threatens Francis and calls Mary his property. Mary, Francis, and Bash discover Tomas's plot to marry Mary to be legitimized. There's an altercation between Francis, Bash, and Tomas, and Tomas ends up re-injuring Bash from his stab wound with the English, and Francis is forced to kill him. Mary gets her engagement to Francis reinstated on her terms, but their relationship is still very tenuous. So episode 5 is very dramatic. In the beginning of the episode, we see two women falling asleep in a carriage, making their way through the woods to go to court, and a stranger on the road stops their driver and says, "This road is shut down, but go this way." And a little further into the woods, the carriage is brutally attacked by ruffians who slaughter all but one girl, who manages to run all the way back to the French castle. Meanwhile, in New Love Bliss, Mary and Francis are kissing all over the place and playing like they're just a normal couple, but you really shouldn't get your hopes up, because that poor, traumatized woman who barely survived shows up and just happens to be Francis's ex-lover. Her name is Olivia, and they're very touchy. Bash tells Mary that she left several months ago before Mary arrived, and it completely broke Francis's heart. Olivia tells Francis that she was ruined because her future husband found out about the sexual relationship between her and Francis. And while Francis assures Mary that he has no feelings for Olivia anymore, he does feel responsible for her and wants to rehabilitate her reputation and find her a match. When Mary could be jealous and turn her friends against Olivia, she instead decides to bring her into their group and tries to make her feel accepted. Bash and royal guards go into the woods to investigate who lured Olivia's group into an ambush, and they find Olivia's driver hung up in the woods and try to rescue him back at the castle. While Mary is trying to be sweet, Olivia is sowing seeds of doubt. She tells Mary that they'd spoken of marriage and that she knows Francis better in and out of the bedroom. and she plans to offer herself to Francis as an option. Francis again reassures Mary of his feelings, but seems really resistant to sending Olivia away. Nostradamus reveals the death of the driver to Bash, but before he died, the driver said he heard them, the group that attacked them, discussing a deal they made with a demon. He threatens to make Olivia his mistress, so Mary storms off to drink with Bash. After they've imbibed in a little bit of alcohol, Bash and Mary do kiss, and Francis sees, of course. Mary tries to clear the air with Francis, but he refuses to talk to her. And in her bathing chamber, doing a little queenly self-care, it's revealed between Catherine and Olivia that Catherine set up the Olivia thing, with the intention of Olivia getting pregnant and marrying Francis. While walking through the castle, Bash is confronted by a woodsman who warns him of retribution. Bash must sacrifice someone or they will take his life. The woodsman then throws himself out of the window to his death. The next morning, Mary finds a necklace matching the woodsman's necklace on her pillow. She shows it to Bash, and he pulls aside Francis and Mary to explain the sacrifice and the possible threat against her. Mary and Francis are still fighting, so of course Olivia is hanging around trying to seduce him. However, the characters cannot get a single moment to breathe and actually talk, so the characters try to figure out who is the mole in the castle. Bash asks Diane about the human sacrifice, and it's revealed that Diane used to be pagan as well, and it's been kept hidden. So it seems like they might be interested in Bash due to that connection. And again, Mary wakes up to a still bleeding stag hung above her head, and she has a burn from the pendant on her hand. Working with Catherine, Mary questions all the servants of the castle, but they refuse to say anything. Catherine threatens to kill all the servants' families if they don't come forward. Bash travels into the woods with a prisoner with the intention of sacrificing him. Francis finally confronts Mary about her kiss with Bash, and he basically tells her off because, men can get with whoever they want, but women, especially queens, have to remain chaste and virginal. He's like, my biggest mistake was being honest with you. One of the servants approaches Catherine in private to say she saw one of Catherine's guard carrying the stag covered in blood, and Catherine connects it to her closest guard. Mary finds out that her lady's maid is also a pagan, and in the woods, Bash strings up the prisoner and a pagan shows up. Instead of killing the prisoner, he attacks the priest instead. While the priest and Bash are sparring, the priest goads him with the knowledge of his parentage until Bash manages to best and kill him. As they're riding back to the castle, the prisoner reveals he overheard the truth of Bash's family, so Bash pushes him over the cliff. Back at the castle, Francis tells Bash he forgives him, and he frees Mary from any romantic responsibility and decides to keep his distance. Immediately after their argument, Francis hooks up with Olivia, and at the end of the episode, they're burning the two revealed pagans, and they both prophesies a hymn that is coming for all of them and their children. On to episode 7, when Catherine tries to congratulate Olivia on getting Francis into her bed. She admits that Francis is very clearly still in love with Mary. She admits he called out Mary's name in the height of bliss. Anyways, in this episode, foreign dignitaries from Italy, including Count Vincent, whose son was held for ransom and eventually returned to him dead, are coming to stay at the castle. King Henry and their main troops are out dealing with skirmishes across France. Diane is trying to secure their place at court by getting Bash legitimized and possibly trying to get him on the throne. Tension within Italy is immediately obvious, even more so when Italy's troops lock down the castle, claiming restitution. Their only hope is that Francis and Catherine can strike a deal with the Count, but in the meantime, Mary seeks assistance from Clarissa to get people safely through the tunnels. During the negotiations, Catherine tries to offer Mary as a forced bride, but instead, Francis offers himself as a hostage, which Vincent agrees to. Francis is locked up and guarded, so Catherine and Mary work together to provide a distraction while Francis gets everyone out. Catherine offers herself as a final sacrifice to get Mary and the girls out, and when Mary tells Francis about the plan, they kiss goodbye, and Mary makes him promise that he won't come back, because she won't be missed. Sorry. They set Olivia to guard / open the passage into the secret tunnels for everyone. Mary and the girls are extremely nervous about, well, what the troops will do to them. So Catherine makes some promise after sharing a really horrible story of her family being stormed and her being passed around when she was a child, that she would protect them at all costs and that they would survive. During Vincent's feast, Francis manages to get all the servants and families out of the castle. While they're escaping, Olivia throws a fit about being left behind to guard the passage and let Mary through. She eventually abandons her post altogether, and let's just say Clarissa doesn't really like that. Mary and the girls try to get out, but they can't open the passage door, so they're forced to go back to the party. Back at the feast, in desperation, Catherine tries to sacrifice the girls again to Vincent, but he eventually breaks down in grief. He unleashes his men on Mary and the girls, and Catherine saves them from more attack by poisoning his men, and then Mary ultimately kills him. Mary asks Catherine why she saved her, and they have a very intimate bonding moment together. Bash reveals his mother's plot to work with Vincent to get rid of Francis and put Bash on the throne. And in the final moments of the episode, Francis admits to being in love with Catherine, and they have this delicious, sexy moment where they're yelling at each other, and they can't help it but kiss each other, and they have sex, and In episode 7, Francis and Mary are steeped in engagement bliss, but of course things are not going well elsewhere. Diane is trying to oust Francis as the future king. I mean, it doesn't really work, but she's trying. And it's been confirmed that Mary is the future Queen of England over her cousin Elizabeth. Now that she has been confirmed, Henry has finally agreed to marry them so that he can have more power. He would then own Scotland, France, and England. But Mary's cousin Elizabeth has a full army and many supporters for her English claim, and if Mary officially stakes her claim, it puts Mary, her cousin, and their countries at war. Henry, ever aware of Catherine's scheming, threatens to kill her if she interferes with him getting England. Meanwhile, parading around as Diane, a priest approaches Kenna about her letters to the Vatican and spills the beans about the legitimacy attempts and warns her against continuing. Kenna immediately goes to the Queen about Diane's scheme. Catherine and Nostradamus propose a scheme to convince Mary of his visions or poison her otherwise. And Catherine makes herself vulnerable to Mary by telling her about the visions, possibly facing treason should Mary go to Henry in an attempt to convince her to break off their engagement. Mary confirms with Nostradamus what he saw and tells her she will be blamed for the death of Catherine's firstborn. That Francis, no older than he is now, will be cold to her touch. She will be married, childless, and alone in the castle with no one to turn to. And one among her girls will die before the end of winter. Mary is able to confirm that several of Nostradamus' prophecies in the past have come true, and Catherine confronts Diane about her schemes and threatens her if she doesn't leave the royal court. But she does offer poison to Diane to give Kenna as punishment for ratting her out. While visiting Kenna at the infirmary, Ailey takes a cup of poison meant for Kenna and dies, but not just from the poison. She gets pushed down the stairs by Clarissa and cracks her head open. They find her dying, and the final words she says are, "We must go home." As Diane is saying goodbye to Bash, it's revealed that she never actually poisoned Kenna, but she does plan to keep getting Bash on the throne while she's gone. Nostradamus is inspecting Ailey's body and questioning Clarissa. It's clearly not the same poison that Catherine uses, and Clarissa says she did it because Mary needed to believe in Nostradamus's visions. Mary plans to escape alone back to Scotland, so she tells Henry she won't lay claim to England and is giving up the alliance with France. However, Mary refuses to tell Francis the truth about the visions, and when he tries to get her to change her mind, she's forced to flee without saying goodbye. As she's trying to run, Bash offers to come with her, and they ride off together. The last scene is Francis watching them ride off and falling to his knees, which is a notable part of Nostradamus' visions. I'm just saying. They are eventually found by the King's Guard and forced back to court. Back at the castle, Francis meets them at the door and demands answers from Mary, but when she continues to lie to him about the truth of their broken engagement, in front of the king and queen, Mary refuses to marry Francis, so Henry threatens Bash's life and Mary's reputation. Mary reveals the prophecy to Francis, and of course he doesn't believe her. Seeing that she's got nowhere to go, she tells the king she'll claim England and marry his son, but not Francis. She wants him to legitimize Bash, make him the heir, and she'll marry him. Catherine tells Francis about Mary's proposal to Bash, and Francis beats the shit out of him. Mary breaks up the fight, but Francis tells Mary he'll never forgive her. Catherine arranges for Mary and Bash to disappear. However, when an assassin goes to take Mary, she's actually in the dungeons with Henry and Bash. Henry summoned her to agree to her terms. He drags Catherine to the throne room and demands an annulment and calls out all of her crimes. But Francis steps in and demands that Catherine stops all of her scheming. He says goodbye and leaves the castle. As Catherine tries to leave France, Henry has her in prison. And as Nostradamus is taking food to Clarissa after he locked her up, she stabs him in the neck and escapes. And to make things a little bit spicy, the last scene of the episode, Mary is talking to Bash and he calls her, say it with me, my wife. Episode 10, while Henry is in Rome getting Bash legitimized, Bash is left as a stand-in, but he continues to shirk his responsibilities. Mary convinces him to step in as regent, but he proves incapable of really making any important decisions. And during a meeting with his subject, a woman who clearly has a relationship with Bash is accused of thieving. It is revealed that the woman is Bash's pregnant cousin. She is a pagan, and they try to get her out of the castle. On the journey back, they get attacked by pagans. And it is revealed to Mary that his cousin and Bash and his family are pagans. His cousin goes into labor and she dies in labor. They take the child back to the castle and put it in the nursery with the other orphaned children, but the baby has that pagan symbol on its foot. They say that the pagan symbol will go away, but they can't let anybody know what's going on. Okay, we're back after a little bit of a break and a change in angle because I wanted to get comfy. We have so much to talk about still. We're on to episode 11. Catherine's family shows up in the castle to tell Catherine that they were able to stop the Pope from seeing Henry about Bash. However, it pissed Henry off and now he's after Catherine's head. When Henry gets back from Rome, he tries to have Catherine beheaded with charges of adultery with Nostradamus. He brings in a Frenchman named Richard, a friend of Henry's, to hold the trial and find evidence against her. And he has Kenna testify to seeing Catherine having an affair in reward for him finding her a husband. Catherine doubles down on her attempts to kill Bash and discovers Mary's scheme with Isabel's baby. She sees the mark on the baby's foot and she threatens Mary with the knowledge of Bash's parentage, and Mary threatens her back. Catherine visits Nostradamus in the dungeons and Harry interrupts them to offer Nostradamus a deal to give up his affair with Catherine and he won't kill him. So Catherine makes her rounds, asking questions and threatening people, and with the help of her family who torture the wet nurse from the nursery, they discover where the baby was actually sent. It's a race to get the baby first between Catherine and Bash and Mary. In her chambers, Clarissa threatens Catherine, and when asked, Nostradamus tells Catherine that he feels responsible for Clarissa. His father bought Clarissa home as a baby because the baby's mother wanted a birthmark removed. Instead of removing the mark, he disfigured the baby's face and told the mother the baby died. Nostradamus' father wanted her to be killed, but Nostradamus couldn't. So he tried to find her a family in the village to live with, but the villagers abused her, and he brought her to the castle. During the conversation, Catherine breaks down in tears, and she's angry. She confronts Henry, and they have a hurt-filled argument about their marriage, jealousy, and their past, and they end up having sex. Bash and Mary arrive at the cottage where the baby is staying, but they're followed closely by Catherine's family and guards. Bash and Mary manage to hide, but Bash gets stabbed, and the guards find and take Isabel's baby. After the guards and Catherine's family has left, the orphanage's mother, the covenant mother, the convent's mother, whatever, reveals to Mary and Bash that Catherine's first child was from a man she was having an affair with. She attests to a birthmark on the baby's face and that the child was handed off to Nostradamus' father. Henry realizes that the man that Catherine had an affair with is Richard and has him killed. And in a last-ditch effort to save herself, Catherine reveals the truth of Bash's family via a pagan heirloom found in Diane's room. When Henry's guard, who has been with Catherine nonstop, attests to the fact that the evidence was found in Diana's room, Henry beheads him and has Catherine taken away. Bash tells Mary he never wanted to be king, he just wanted her, and he will kill Henry for threatening her. Mary tells him her heart is open to him, and they kiss. And then in the final scene of the episode, Catherine poisons Mary's bathwater and holds a knife to her neck until they both pass out from the fumes of the bathwater. However, Clarissa saves them both and Catherine is hauled away. Episode 12 starts out with Mary tells Catherine she plans to bring Clarissa out of hiding and into the castle as a member of the court, and she plans to take care of her and Bash's younger half-brothers, heretofore named the boys. Catherine warns that they will always be in danger, and as soon as Bash is legitimized, so will Bash. Bash and Mary have their first fight, and she uses her status as England's future queen against him. Meanwhile, the incident with Clarissa's mother seems to have unlocked something. She starts leaving bodies behind and going after the boys. In Paris, Lola tracks down her brother, who is deep in debt, and the holder won't let them go until she offers herself to him. However, Francis, pretending to be a count, wagers to save her debt. When he wins, Francis and Lola get drunk and have sex. Bash throws his brothers a festival, and Mary and Bash make up. However, Bash has them taken to a nearby abbey in secret, and when the boys' guards make camp for them, Clarissa murders and kidnaps the boys. A guard summons Nostradamus after he hears coughing in Catherine's cell and finds her hanged. He takes her to the infirmary where the plot of her escape is revealed. She plans to run off to Italy, but Nostradamus tells her about her son's kidnapping and she decides to stay. Bash tells Mary about the servant killed in Catherine's room and a box of keepsakes in the passageway. In the box is a hunk of Clarissa's hair knotted around the boy's hair. Catherine sneaks into Mary's room and shows her the hunk of hair, and Catherine joins Mary and Bash on their hunt for Clarissa and the boys. Clarissa tells the boys to fill their pockets with rocks before they go swimming, but the group finds them before they can be hurt. Clarissa takes Charles, one of the boys, hostage and blames Catherine for her pain. While she's distracted, Mary bashes her over the head with a rock, killing her. And then Catherine and Mary have a vulnerable moment together about each of their loves for the Medici children. Bash and Mary make up, which is such a stark difference between the two legs of the love triangle, because Mary and Francis are all stubborn fights and passion, whereas Bash and Mary feel more like a royal relationship, albeit where Bash is much more into Mary than she is him. That being said, Bash does propose to Mary, and at the end of the episode, as Francis is saying goodbye to Lola, they get told that Catherine is set to die, and they rush back to the French court together. Lastly, in the last tragic act against Clarissa, to end a most tragic life, rather than a respectful burial, the guards throw her down a snowy hill and place a marker by her head. Episode 13 opens with Catherine literally planning her beheading as the most excessive beheading party. And as Francis and Lola race back to the castle, they agree to not tell Mary about their hookup. Meanwhile, to spark a vision, Nostradamus hangs himself and has a vision that he says will change everything and cause his death by Catherine's own hands. To add more spice to the beheading, Mary's mother, Marie, arrives. She tells Mary that Scotland is falling into Protestantism, which threatens them as Catholic rulers. After the conversation with her mom, Mary demands that her and Bash get eloped to stop her mother from stopping their marriage, and Bash rushes off to get it done. Lola and Francis return to the castle together, and while Mary and Francis are exchanging heartbreaking glances, Kenna is questioning Lola's story about how they met. Nostradamus tells Catherine that his visions have changed, that Francis will live after his and Mary's marriage, and they will have children. In a rage, she tells Nostradamus that if she can't convince Mary to marry Francis, she'll have Nostradamus burned to death and watch it happen. Catherine and Marie convince Francis to go after Mary. Francis finds Bash at the church and they fight about Mary, and she breaks them up, and each of them tries to convince her to choose. Mary confronts Catherine, and Catherine slits her wrists to convince Mary that she's telling the truth and not trying to save her own head about Nostradamus' visions. Mary admits she believes Catherine and Nostradamus, but she doesn't know who or what she wants. She loves them both. But before Mary can talk to Nostradamus, an English emissary comes to the court to tell Henry of the Queen's death. Henry demands Mary to claim England immediately and marry one of his sons that night. Mary refuses to pick, but while trying to figure it out, the letter of legitimization from the Vatican comes via Catherine. Can we trust it? Who's to say? But Mary does. She immediately goes to Bash and admits she loves him, but she loves Francis more. Mary finds Francis and they reunite with a kiss. When she gives the letter to Francis, he opens it to reveal it is empty. Francis asks her to marry him again, and she says yes. Mary asks Francis to ensure Bash's safety, and in return, Francis exiles Bash to Italy. Bash pushes back and says that if he made a show of accepting him, he would be fine, but Francis admits he's not inclined to do so. Lola lectures Kenna about being back with the king, and Kenna calls her out for lying about her time with Francis. At the wedding prep, Nostradamus overhears a servant singing a song he used to hear Clarissa sing, and she claims she was forced to sing it in his presence. At the wedding, it's revealed that Mary's mom set up the news of the Queen of England, and we're finally at the wedding between Mary and Francis, and Mary looks absolutely stunning, and of course Francis is completely besotted with her. As she walks down the aisle, he cries. Nostradamus seeks out Clarissa's body, but she's missing. The wedding celebration is beautiful, and they live happily ever after. Just kidding, of course. Nostradamus returns to the castle, sees Francis and Mary kissing, and has another vision of Francis dying. Henry forces Bash to watch Mary and Francis's consummation, and meanwhile, as Bash is being carted away by guards who try to kill him, he escapes and rides out into the Bloodwoods. Whew, let's have a brief intermission before we go into episode 14, because we still have 10 episodes left, which is absolutely wild. We've already had the succession change twice. We've had so many people murdered, so much relationship drama, and we still have so much more to go. So, the episode 14 starts with a 2-month time skip. Mary and Francis are coming back to the French court after their honeymoon, and they're working very hard to start pumping out those heirs. At the court, an Archduke Ferdinand of Bohemia is in the country after a skirmish with French ships. Henry sets Kenna up with Ferdinand, and when Mary and Francis return, Catherine pulls Francis aside to tell him that Bash never made it to Italy. Meanwhile, Bash is hunting in the countryside and gets saved from a boar trap by a hunter. She takes him back to her home to stay for a couple days, and Olivia pops up scrounging around in the woods. She's clawed up, she won't talk, and she doesn't seem to know who she is. When they talk about sending her back into the woods, she starts slitting her wrists and collapses. During this episode, we start getting hints of Lola being in a way, in a way. And this is where Henry's crazy just starts ramping up. Up to this point, like I said, we've seen hints of his desperation for power and his rage, but really things start going downhill here. So, he's fucking the Archduke's sister against an open window frame and throws her out of it. Now, obviously, we've had a ton of people being beheaded and poisoned, but largely Henry has been the typical spoiled king, but now we've introduced a whole other level of stuff. Somehow Bash manages to get back into the castle to bring Olivia to Nostradamus. This is kind of where the romance starts. And Bash tells him it seems like she's been poisoned or possessed by the thing in the woods that the blood pagans sacrifice things to. Nostradamus seems very resistant to the idea. Meanwhile, Henry rushes to Catherine to deal with the window problem. Kenna confronts Lola about her pregnancy with Francis, and Kenna tries to push Lola into becoming Francis's mistress, but Lola does not want to. She wants to terminate the pregnancy instead. Mary finds Bash in her rooms, and he tells her he's suspicious about Francis's assassination attempt, where Bash was trying to escape, and the guards turned on him. He tells her to investigate the truth and light a candle in her window to signal him to meet her in the woods. Catherine and Henry try to clean up the Duchess's splattered body and do a terrible job, as two people who probably never picked up a broom in their life would. They forge a suicide note and throw her out her own bedroom window. Lola bribes a servant to tell her of a doctor to go to terminate. A priest discovers Olivia in Nostradamus's chambers, and when he tries to wake her from a nightmare, she stabs him with his own crucifix and kills him. Mary asks Francis about Bash's accusations, and he denies them and storms off. And when they find Lola's chamber empty, Mary and Bash run after her to the doctors. When Henry and Catherine meet with the Archduke, he claims it couldn't be suicide as she couldn't write. Catherine claims she caught his sister in the throes of passion, and when Catherine had the lover tortured, he revealed that she threw herself out the window in shame, and he wrote the note to cover his tracks. When the Archduke asks to see the lover, they take him to the dead priest's body and claim he was killed in the midst of torture. There aren't too many moments of levity in this show, but this scene actually made me laugh out loud for like several minutes. Anyways, Mary gets to Lola before the procedure can happen, and Mary finds out that it's Francis's baby. And then back at the castle, Henry and Catherine have a cute little bonding moment that results in an almost kiss. And Mary rightfully tells off Lola for being a truly awful friend. Lola begs her to keep it a secret until she can find someone else to marry. And Bash returns to the hunter's home to get some banging in before he leaves France. And in unhinged fashion, Henry starts fucking Kenna against an open window. Nostradamus tries to get Olivia to talk, and all she will say is, "The darkness is coming, and it will take us all." Episode 15 starts with Kenna complaining to Henry of being too rough during sex, and he tries to introduce a third into their relationship, after implying that if he didn't, he wouldn't hold up his end of the deal of finding her a husband. Nostradamus tries to convince Olivia to talk, and she reveals that she was held hostage for months for some creature that they tried to sacrifice her to. It fed on her at night for months, and she managed to escape. As Bash is leaving the hunter's house, they find a blood mark on her front door, meaning her family is meant to be a sacrifice, and they decide to figure out what's going on together. Back at the castle, Kenna wakes up to the third woman dead with bruises on her neck. She immediately tells Catherine, who gets to work covering it up. When Catherine confronts Henry about the dead woman, he's ranting about England, amongst other things, and it's revealed he's been getting headaches, and his toilet is black. Meaning his urine, I'm assuming. When Catherine suggests he sees Nostradamus, he gets angry, paranoid, and threatens her quite aggressively. Bash and the hunter's family hunker down to prepare for the attack, but the family seems really resistant. They drug Bash and leave him tied up with a goat when the creature comes, and the creature ends up looking like a man. It slaughters the goat with its bare hands and takes the hunter woman when she looks at it. Catherine stops Henry from getting rough with Kenna, and during their confrontation, Henry reveals his intention to bend and break everyone to his will, as ordained by God. In episode 16, Nostradamus drains one of Olivia's wounds and finds a tooth inside of it. Meanwhile, in meetings, Henry tortures noblemen, and Catherine interrupts his meetings, and he accuses her of poisoning him. The episode centers around the idea of the bean queen. Basically, any woman can find a bean and be treated like a queen for the day, including the king's attentions. Nostradamus tells Catherine he can't find poison in any of Henry's food, but gives her a sedative that will induce a coma. A servant from the castle kitchens finds the bean and immediately latches on to her. I'm going to call her the bean queen from now on. Bash returns to the castle to tell Henry of what's going on in the woods, and he's imprisoned by Henry. Catherine gives the bean queen the tonic to give Henry. Bash takes Francis to talk to Olivia, who tells them the truth. And Nostradamus tells them the tooth that he pulled out of her wound was human. Henry propositions Mary, and when she asks if he's unwell, he says, "I was picked by God. What could be unwell?" Meanwhile, Francis, Bash, and their guards hunt the woods for the creature, where they find fresh tracks. Out in the snowy field where the footprints end, Francis finds a disembodied hand. But as he reaches for it, the frozen lake underneath him cracks and he goes under. Francis manages to pull him out of the water and get him back to the castle. However, when the guards find the creature's cave, it's empty of everything but blood. Back at the castle, the Bean Queen makes efforts to take over as the actual queen, and Henry has become completely unhinged. He reveals that he ordered Bash's execution, and he tries to kill Bash himself with a sword. Francis talks him down in the moment, but he threatens them to follow along with his randomly thought up harebrained plan, including making the Bean Queen the actual queen and poisoning Catherine. Oh, and marrying Kenna and Bash at a threat of a sword while he's sitting on the throne barefoot. In episode 17, King Henry's mental well-being is on a sharp decline, so Catherine is trying to divert all important matters to herself, and the court doesn't really seem to have noticed. One of Catherine's ladies' maids approaches Mary about Catherine's attempts to replace the Bean Queen with someone she can control. The maid offers Mary info if she gets her out of the court. The maid reveals that there was a clause slipped into Mary's contract that states if she doesn't produce an heir before they die, Scotland belongs to France. Francis and Mary discover that her mother is in on it, so they plan to tell the Protestants in Scotland in hopes of causing unrest, forcing Scotland and France to burn the evidence of their deceit. It works, and after a rousing speech, the influential Scotsman invited to spread the truth bowed down to her in support. Meanwhile, Catherine has a little fling with a Scottish guy, and of course he goes and runs his mouth about Mary's meeting, and because Catherine has a big old galaxy brain, she immediately figures out the truth, and her entertainment for the night takes a dirt nap, along with the rest of the Scots. When Mary finds out, she slaps Catherine, and Catherine lectures her about the truth of being a queen, and lots of death at your hands. Meanwhile, Henry starts having vivid hallucinations of a young boy holding a racket. Lastly, Mary threatens to reveal the truth about Henry if Catherine refuses to destroy the marriage clause. Catherine burns it while Francis and Mary watch. Side note, during this episode, Mary is being a complete badass and Francis just gazes at her lovingly, which is delightful. And that is until the end of the episode when she tells him that she fully intended to burn France down if Catherine didn't agree to burning the contract. Episode 18, a cardinal is staying in France for a week to broker deals about land, so they have to hide Henry from the cardinals. Mary and Francis take over negotiations with them. However, Mary's half-brother shows up in France to say Scotland is struggling under the French rule of their government and calls Mary back home. Francis tries to dissuade her from going, and they fight over Mary leaving, and Francis's constant putting France above Scotland. Henry becomes completely obsessed with Kenna to the extreme jealousy of the Bean Queen, who has become something of his dominatrix. And while Bash tries to protect her, Kenna and Catherine make a plan to separate Henry from the Bean Queen. In reward for getting rid of her, Catherine will give Kenna and Bash an estate to escape to. To make it up to Mary, Francis and Mary make plans to travel to Scotland. Mary's brother tries to warn her off of bringing Francis, though, and Francis and Bash see his footman paying an expensive courtesan, suspiciously expensive. When they interrogate him, they find gold from England in his bags, but he refuses to tell the truth. Frances tells Mary, and it's revealed that her half-brother has the strongest claim to the Scottish throne, and maybe he didn't want to see her home safely. During a sex game between the Bean Queen and Henry, in which he's tied up as if on a cross, Catherine tricks a bishop into accessing his room, thereby catching them in the act. The bishop convinces him that God is against his recent sexcapades, and Henry banishes the Bean Queen. Later, she ends up claiming a pregnancy, and Catherine has her locked up for her safety until she recruits her for this, League of Secret Ladies that Catherine has, and sends her away. Mary's brother convinces Mary to leave immediately based on a lie about the Protestants planning rebellion. Frances buys off her brother's footman and confirms he was paid to kill her on her journey, and that England wants her brother on the throne. At the end of the episode, Bash and Kenna have a cute moment of Bash protecting her, and Henry keeps having his hallucinations. Frances tells Mary what the footman says, but she still tries to leave. So Frances has her locked up in a tower until her brother leaves, and she warns him that if Scotland falls because of him, their relationship and alliance will be over. Episode 19 starts a month after the end of the last episode, and Scotland is under siege. When they go to Catherine for troops to help Scotland, she tells them that Mary's cousin, Elizabeth, has been named the heir to England. Henry refuses to help, so Mary reaches out to her uncle Christian, a notably dangerous man who has an army of mercenaries and children he's stolen from their families. In repayment, Christian demands the position of the right hand to the king. Meanwhile, Henry sends the remaining forces to Calais to take it back from England, leaving them completely unprotected and making the French court open to siege. When Francis tells him this, Henry recites some scripture and claims he's divinely protected. Thankfully, Catherine has the army in hand, and when Francis denies Christian his position, Christian demands to be his right hand instead. And Francis, in turn, will lead Christian's army to Scotland himself. Henry discovers what Catherine has been doing and plans to lead the invasion of Calais himself, without pants. And Francis realizes that there's no way to stop the invasion, so he uses Christian's army to take Calais instead of going to Scotland. Suffice to say, Mary is displeased by this, Francis putting France first again and going against his word to her again. They part on a very sad goodbye, and Mary resolves to do whatever she needs to do to save Scotland, regardless if Francis can forgive her. In episode 20, Catherine's cousins visit, one of them being Henry's first lover before Catherine, Hortensia. Mary asks Catherine for help secreting her mom out of Scotland, where she is holed up under threat of siege, using her own funds, not Francis's, Catherine's own funds, and she denies her. Mary meets with a mercenary to steal Catherine's money, and she tells him not to harm anyone, but he doesn't really abide by that. He pretty much immediately kidnaps Catherine while she's in confessional, after maybe murdering a priest. He ties her up blindfolded, and she takes 2.5 seconds to figure out that Mary sent him, and she offers him double the money. Catherine's cousin comes to Mary about her kidnapping and makes it clear that the Medicis have zero interest in paying the ransom for her return. They also receive an ear with Catherine's earring in it, and Mary finds out that Catherine's personal guard, the ones that slaughtered Mary's men, were on loan by her cousins, the Medicis, the Hortense. Hortense threatens Mary and reveals that Catherine and her have been at odds for years. The mercenary gives Catherine a bloody head in a cloth bag after Catherine demands that he bring her the head of who hired him. When he lets Catherine go, she unravels it to discover it's her cousin's head. A letter is found in Hortense's room claiming she was being blackmailed for money, and the mercenary confirms in a conversation with Mary that it was Mary's plan. She also takes Hortense's guards and sends them to Scotland. Episode 21, Francis and their armies return to France. Henry is not excited by his son getting any attention from the war, but Catherine manages to assuage his anger, and he announces that the Queen of England has died and they're backing Mary as the future queen. Mary is still resistant to laying claim, so she sends a letter to her cousin asking for her truce. Her uncle intercepts the message and warns her against removing a powerful bargaining chip from her arsenal with France. And while out hunting for the creature in the Bloodwoods, Bash finds a young boy asleep in the bushes with a whistle around his neck that is used to summon the creature. They take him back to the castle where he warms up to Kenna. He tells her the man with the sharp teeth took him to Visegard, a scary place deep in the mountains. Kenna takes the child with her to their estate away from court, and Bash and Nostradamus go to Visegard. During the carriage ride, it's revealed that the child's father was killed by Bash and he saw it. And one of Catherine's secret ladies finds out Henry has already mobilized against England. Catherine and Mary propose assassinating Henry, and Francis immediately says no. He plans to take Henry on a hunting trip on a last-ditch effort to get through to him. And of course, Catherine loves to be prepared, so she makes plans behind his back. With Mary, very reluctant. During their hunting trip, Henry tells Francis about his father selling him and his brothers as hostages when they were children, with the parting lesson that sons must sacrifice for fathers. Francis comes back believing his father has come back into himself. However, during his nightly communion alone, he's attacked by an assassin, and Henry brutally beats the assassin to death. Catherine managed to get the priest before he could take the poison. However, Mary's uncle hires someone with the intention of getting on Henry's good side, and he's successful. Of course, Francis and Mary have a fight about the poisoning attempt, and lastly, we see Henry ranting about Francis to hallucinations and making plans to kill Francis and Mary. In the last episode of the season, Henry summons all the court members to the courtyard of the castle and puts them to the sword, threatening death on all sinners. He stabs a man for confessing that he has committed no sins after his last confessional. Bash and Nostradamus make it to Visegard, but the town is abandoned and the homes are filled with dead bodies and drawings of predictions made by the pagans. Very accurate predictions. They also find a rhyme that Pascal had been repeating on the walls, and at their estate, Kenna is attacked by a robed man who looks like the same priest that Bash killed. The man claims to be the darkness and tries to persuade Pascal to sacrifice Kenna to the gods. Bash and Nostradamus get to them in time, but the man claims if Pascal does not succeed, the Black Plague will be unleashed. Meanwhile, Henry plans Francis's poisoning and his wedding to Mary. He's a bit of a multitasking event planner. He also starts flirting with Mary, which is just very weird. He sticks his hand up her dress during a tournament thing. It's creepy. And Catherine immediately figures out what he's doing. During a celebration of his conquering of Calais, Henry has cannons fired by two of their naval ships at each other, and one of the ships is hit, immediately destroying it and killing all the men on board. Henry rages, and they demand that they do it again the next day. Catherine convinces the king to join a joust, and Mary shows up wearing the English coat of arms. all but declaring herself the rightful queen. In a fit of jealousy over the crowd cheering for Mary, Henry decides to joust himself. During the joust, his opponent stabs him in the eye, gravely injuring him, and it's revealed that the opponent is Francis. And as they're saying their goodbyes, Catherine admits he's the love of her life and breaks down, and Henry breaks her heart one more time by asking her to take care of Diane. As Francis is saying his goodbyes, Henry tells him about his elder brother who was meant to be king, the boy we've been seeing the hallucination. Henry admits to killing his brother to take his place, and he warns Francis of the weight that betrayal leaves on the soul. And as he's dying, he asks, "Can I let it go now?" And the vision of his brother holds out his hand, and he takes his last breath. Francis walks out of Henry's rooms to shouts of "Long live the king," and he stumbles into the arms of Bash. Lola gives birth in a random village. The women helping her says she's likely to die and tells her to give her her last word. She has the woman write a letter to Mary asking her to care for the baby with Francis should she die. As Francis and Mary are having a conversation to repair the relationship, the letter from Lola arrives, and Mary tells Francis the truth. Mary begs him to go to her, and he leaves. When she tries to get a doctor to go help, Catherine and Nostradamus tell her the plague is spreading. Mary catches Francis before he leaves and tells him not to leave. He still does, and Mary tells them to close the gates behind him. And that's it for season 1. It is a total of 22 episodes, an hour each. It's a long one, and I think it's such a good intro to this show. It's angsty, it's full of tension, it's moody, it's dark, it's everything a CW show should be, and I love it so much. So in summation, this show is chaos in the best possible way. It's not historically accurate at all. Think flower crowns, dramatic love triangles, and indie pop in a medieval castle, but it's addictive. Mary is such a solid lead. She's sweet and strong and constantly thrown into political messes and emotional heartbreak. Francis and Bash keep the tension high, and her ladies-in-waiting bring real friendship and drama of their own. There's, of course, also the creepy pagan forest cult, surprise stabbing, secret babies. So much happens, but somehow it works. It's like Gossip Girl put in a corset and run through a haunted castle. It's messy, dramatic, and ridiculous, and I couldn't stop watching. I highly recommend if you want a historical drama that's more vibes than facts. But let's talk down below if you've watched this show, if you're interested in it, what you thought of it. If you did watch it, I would love to talk. Season 2, 3, and 4 will be coming very soon. I hope you will stick around for them. Make sure you subscribe so you get notified when that happens. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.